Hi, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Future Tech podcast series. We're now into series 3, and this podcast is aimed at STEM graduates, where myself, Charlie Sell, the MD at Arrows Group, is speaking to chief of staffs, HR directors, CIOs, CTOs, entrepreneurs of tech businesses, both within the UK and globally, asking them a bit about their story, thoughts, what's important to them when thinking around the people agenda, and also career advice for many of our listeners. So really happy to have Pam Roberts with me today. Pam is the Chief People Officer at Black Swan. Black Swan is a global AI tech business. Anyone who's been on LinkedIn or is keeping track of the fastest growing companies will see Black Swan up there with one of the most entrepreneurial businesses involved in technology. So Pam, really great to have you on the show.
Thank you. Great to be here.
And how are you today?
Very well, despite the gloomy Monday morning.
Yeah, we were talking earlier, weren't we, about sort of lockdown version 2 and trying to think of new things to do. And
absolutely, I think we're going to have to embrace Christmas early this year. I think that's the only way forward.
Absolutely, with a smile on our face and you know, knowing a vaccine's around the corner, it's
hopefully coming to the end. Absolutely.
So let's jump straight in and find out a bit about your story.
Thank you. Okay, so thank you for the introduction. As you mentioned, I'm currently the Chief People Officer at Black Swan Data. Been there just over 2 years. Black Swan uses AI to unlock the power of social data and predict consumer trends. This allows clients to be first to market. We've got quite a catalogue of clients: Pepsi, Mars, P&G, so some really exciting clients that work with our product.
Fantastic. And so how did you get into it all?
Oh gosh, so I'm incredibly passionate about the workplace where people can be themselves and be engaged and happy. That's the most important thing. I've been in HR for coming up to 20 years. I've worked in many industries: media, tech, and finance, based in the US and the UK, and looked after teams from Asia across to the West Coast of America, so pretty broad experience. I started my career in a graduate position at an investment bank in 2001. Quite interesting times there. And over the years, I've moved away from the more traditional and corporate environments into early stage businesses. I think building people functions from the ground up is much more interesting, a lot more harder, but the realization that you can really challenge a lot of the traditional approaches to people management, such as career laddering and hierarchy, kind of took me away from those traditional environments and to the likes of Black Swan.
Fantastic. And so, you know, that's a really actually quite an interesting background where you've also worked across Asia and America. And so the people agenda, is there many differences across countries when you're trying to build companies, especially from the ground up, and thinking about the right type of people for the businesses?
No, there's a huge amount to think about. I mean, obviously the where we usually start is the labour laws. How easy is it to hire there? What's the talent base like? And obviously the costs as well. So there's a lot to think through. I think once you've decided to invest in a particular location and you know that you're going to be able to navigate the labour laws, etc., and you're starting to build those teams, recruiting and culture is critical. And the people that you want in those kind of first few hires are people who are going to be cultural champions and really talk to the values of the organization. So those first hires are really critical.
Yeah.
Insights from that.
And thinking about actually the type of cultures you want to create and what are the challenges, especially in the sort of the growing world where the diversity in backgrounds and there's more and more people trying to enter the market. What's important to you when you're trying to build the culture of a business?
So yeah, culture is really it's such an important and critical part of how you're building the business, but it's not an easy problem to solve. Yeah. So you're not going to look at someone's CV and get a good sense of whether they're going to be able to be a culture champion or whether their values are going to be a good fit. So when you're making those first few hires and you're building that culture, you've really got to align the value set and the individual. I think once you have that in place, really making sure, and it's getting harder and harder given the current environment, but usually we send executives over to those teams and make sure that they're spending time and talking about challenges and how they'd approach it in this case, the Black Swan way. But hard to get on that plane. So how do you create culture in the current environment is a really tough one. We've been doing a lot of hiring out in our South African office. And I think 2 weeks ago, we ran an hour-long session with everyone, the executive team across the globe, all the new hires, and did a bit of a share on our values. Were really critical to that, but just how the business is doing, how the business has grown, our backstory is different teams, and then ended on a really fun quiz. So you capture a bit of the spirit as well. But it's not easy. It's a really difficult problem.
Yeah, because I guess something we've found with lockdown, but also as a business, we've pivoted from being 5 days a week in the office to now fully embracing remote working. And I guess one of the challenges I'll see is actually new hires, how to create that onboarding experience, especially in those first sort of few weeks where in the normal world, that you'd have coffees, you'd have lunches, it'd be all the sort of the out of meeting collaboration that would happen that really makes someone feel welcome or part of a team so quickly. What have you guys done, or what are you thinking about doing that helps that onboarding in now what is more of a remote role?
No, it's a conversation we've been having a lot recently, which is I think we've put a lot of structure around it. So we've created a good onboarding experience for that first week or those first few interactions. But as you say, it's actually the interactions that happen when you're getting a coffee or seeing certain groups of people connecting on a problem and knowing that you can introduce yourself to that problem. Those natural interactions that happen in the office space are no longer happening. So we've been talking a lot. We've set up something called Coffee Lottery, where we pull out 4 names from a hat every couple of days and get those people to meet for a coffee, and they may not have a reason to have ever even interacted before. And I guess while it's presented some challenges, the current environment and situation, it's also presented some opportunities, because if you think of those 4 names, if we were in our offices, we probably would have pulled 4 people together from the London office and the Cape Town office. Now we're seeing no reason why those 4 people can't be from a number of different offices and start to collaborate across locations. And our smaller offices and teams that maybe are only a handful of people in one location are really loving the current environment, because they feel like they're on an equal footing. And head office is also meeting on an all hands Zoom and not in a room together, and they're dialing in. So it's created some really interesting changes. I think there's a lot of learnings for us.
Yeah. Well, I love that lottery idea. That's a great one, and like you say, it's borderless now. So really, you can encourage people who haven't worked in the same offices. Because I guess the other thing I found interesting, especially about tech businesses, is traditionally you'd have technology teams that would be quite a different personality set, or almost quite separated from the rest of the business, marketing, HR, and finance. But the current world, and especially when I think of our STEM grads, it seems to be merging more and more now, where people, the communication skills, the ability to work across functions. Have you seen any change over the recent years when thinking about the sort of different traditional skills or personality traits of people?
Yeah, absolutely. Immediately as you're talking, it's taken me to, I don't know if you're familiar with Project Oxygen, that's obviously very famous from Google, but as they went through the analysis of what made people successful, initially just by looking at what made managers successful, but they kind of boiled it down to what made an employee successful. It was a lot of soft skills that came before the hard skills, which I think is really fascinating. And I would really echo that. I think the skills that each organization is looking for is probably very dependent on their culture, environment, where they are in their journey and their story. But it is a mix of hard skills and soft skills. And I'm trying to think of some of the things that, Project Oxygen brought up, but coaching was one of those ones I remember really significant, and something that when I was at Spring, which is a startup in New York, I was at for a couple of years. That was one of the skills that we tried to train our leaders, and then eventually just individuals across the business in, because we found it was such a critical skill to listening, understanding, and building connectivity across the organization. So I think that's probably one of the biggest trends that I've seen.
Yeah, and that, that, as you said, the communication and connectivity, 100%. And so, is there still challenges that you see in the wider business when thinking about interviewing today and people being able to get equal opportunities to getting jobs? What do you still see as a wider, macro challenge?
Gosh, I mean, what a topic. It's huge, isn't it? And incredibly relevant at the moment. I mean, we're still seeing, just even if you cut data across many organizations, there's not equality at the top. So, it is still a huge problem. It's a problem in pretty much every organization that I've been part of. I think the critical component is the passion to solve it. So seeing commitment and change, and we have this debate a lot at Black Swan, but it's not unique to Black Swan in any way. But how do you start to make change? It has to be a commitment from the leadership team to make small changes, and which will eventually have big results. So we're seeing that across the organization at the moment, and trying to think of some of the things that we've done that are starting to make a real difference. Is we're hiring critical roles, we're starting to make commitments to seeing a number of diverse candidates at the final stage of the selection process. And I think that's probably going to be one of the biggest changes that we'll have made in recent months that will feed through the organization. And we're trying to make sure that our language and the way that we present ourselves to the market is attractive to diverse candidates. We're trying to make sure that when we interview people, we have a diverse interview panel. So obvious things, but really important.
Yeah, and you're right. It's about the actual passion and commitment of the leadership. It isn't just about putting ideas on paper and then filing them away, is it?
Yeah, I think if you can get the conversation to happen at the top and there be commitment to make change, then that's 60% of the battle, and then the rest of it is putting in place the right processes, systems, and checks and balances.
Yeah, because something that we've seen, again, thinking of it from the sort of the recruitment funnel, is it's not actually too difficult to increase the funnel of people from diverse backgrounds applying for a job necessarily, but it's actually tracking how many people go from an application to interview to second round to final. And you tend to see that's the actual pain points or the pinch points is people are quite open to interviewing at the early signs, but where does that unconscious bias kick in, where you suddenly find that the 4 people at final interview are all the same type of background 9 times out of 10 to the person who's doing the final interview?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And sorry, just as you're talking, something that's really coming to mind for me, we do a lot of personality profiling at the exec level. So we use a assessment called Hogan's. And what's very interesting is over the years, we've all kind of become very familiar with Hogan's and understand that actually diversity of profile leads to the best results. So an extreme example of that is we have a lot of, what's the right word? Very passionate, very driven, very pivot. Our founders like to pivot a lot. They can see lots of potential in change. And behind that, they need some completed finishers to get things over the line. So you can see just that diverse kind of approach at the exec level makes a much stronger team. So we use the Hogan to talk a lot about diversity of style in the exec group, in different teams across the organization, and make sure that we are being, we're bringing as many different skills into the team as possible, different perspectives to the team as possible. So using things like that, I think, is really important. And then from there drives that commitment to seeing why diversity is so important.
Yeah. Again, well, that's a great ways of looking at it. And again, using Hogan, using the personality testing, I think the other nice, interesting thing, what we've learned over the years is personality testing, psychometric testing should never be used as a recruitment tool of saying whether someone's right or wrong for the job. It's saying this person would fit this type of team, because actually you need the balanced team, not all the same type of people in there.
And it's okay to have preferences, whether it's that you have a preference for making decisions or working in a very consensus-driven environment. But as long as you understand what your preferences are and true to them, you should be upfront about those in that assessment. What assessments do you use?
We use Spotlight, which is a brilliant one. It's actually started by Andrew Strauss, or not started. But it's all about preferences. It's saying that you're not limited by your preferences, but you should be aware of them rather, and then you're also aware of where your harder ones are, and how do you work to that.
One of my other favorite ones is Strength Finders, which is focused on your 5 top strengths, but it's a really great tool for pulling out strengths. And I have a deep belief that you should always try and coach and develop someone around their strengths and get them to focus on that, rather than, identifying their top 3 weaknesses and getting them to rectify that. But, what are their strengths? Because that's usually where their passion is, and get them really focused on that. So I really like Strength Finders for that one.
Yeah. Oh, this is really interesting, actually. We could talk for hours for this, couldn't we? Because it really does. And then again, for the listeners, I hope this really helps resonate that, there's tools out there now that companies like Black Swan, if we actually invest in them, it not only breaks down the challenges of diversity or unbiased, but actually they're all development tools, because that of self-awareness, EI is such a big thing to try and help people understand. And if you understand it, you can develop it, and don't see it as a barrier.
No, absolutely. And I think gone are the days where companies want individuals to arrive to an interview and conform to very kind of structured and corporate outlook. They want people to come and be themselves at work now, in the spirit of inclusivity. So understanding who you are and being true to yourself through the interview and talking about your preferences will only lead to you finding the right job and in the right environment for you to be successful. So I think it's really important to do that.
Yeah, totally agree. So career advice then. So for our listeners, if there was just 1 or 2 pieces of advice, thinking about our graduates who are now entering the job market, what would it be?
Gosh, that's the good question. So I think first and foremost, find an organization that excites you, that you're going to go to work and want to be part of. I think that's really important. And I think in the spirit of what we've talked about, look at the values and behaviors that are true to you, and then the values and behaviors of that organization. Every organization will advertise their values and who they are on their website. So go on and make sure those things align with who you are. And one of my favorite interviews I have had in the past year, the candidate, very senior candidate, said to me at the end, "When was the last time that you displayed the company values to your team?" And it was such a great question. I had a real moment of, wow, I haven't thought about that in a while. So, I had to have a real reflect and answer the question. But I just really liked the fact that this person wasn't just going to settle for me telling them what the values were. They wanted like hard examples. And yeah, that I just thought was a really, really good question to ask. So please steal that one, adopt that one. And then I think just make sure you get into the weeds of how they develop talent, their commitment to internal development and opportunities, because if you want your career to move forward, which I'm sure many of your listeners do, making sure that organizations are truly committed to that through worked examples in the interview process is really important.
Yeah, brilliant. I think both of those are great pieces of advice. So thank you. You have to find a company you believe in and you're passionate about, because it will help you get through those early hurdles essentially. And yeah, absolutely. I always summarize it almost, or be willing to do continuous learning as well, isn't it? Where you just need to embrace everything. That L&D is so important to that.
Absolutely. And we don't have traditional career ladders at Black Swan. We're not at that stage. We're changing a lot. So it wouldn't make sense for us to have, 10 roles in recruitment, for example. But we do really commit to our junior talent having opportunities to learn and develop. We have White Swan, which is a charity arm of ours that people can get involved in and volunteer with. We run initiatives from we've got a sustainability group to getting involved in the Christmas party, extreme examples, but there's many things that you can get involved in outside of the day-to-day role. So we try and create those opportunities for people to learn and develop in ways that are non-traditional and not not the obvious way that you would experience in a larger organisation.
Yeah, well, fantastic. So, well, Pam, thank you. That has been really, really interesting and great to hear of all the initiatives that you guys are driving.
Thank you. Really lovely to speak to you, Charlie.
Yeah, so that's another episode of our Future Tech podcast series. I hope you've enjoyed it. It will be on our Spotify channel and across the 16 universities' careers web portals. So we will add the link to the bottom of the channel as well. But to the next one, thank you, everybody. And once again, thank you, Pam.
Thank you. Bye.